The Pelicans are asking tough questions down the stretch. What do these games actually tell us? Zion's playing great. The lineup looks better, and the results maybe are misleading, though. It's today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with you on this Monday, we got a week's worth of shows. We are post-trade deadline, which means we can kind of look going forward to this team, and I'm looking forward, no pun intended, I guess there, to all of that. I think it's going to be really fun to kind of analyze this team going forward and see what we learned the remainder of the way. But I want to kind of put this out there. I think it's going to be tough to learn a lot about this team or figure out what's real, what isn't, though we're all going to do our best and we'll be talking about it on the show. And so I want to get into how do we judge this team the rest of the way within the context of the NBA, because I think that's really important. I want to get into some burning questions I have about Jordan Poole and Dejounte Murray. We have an update on him as well. And then, oh man, the luxury tax situation in the NBA as a whole, I find kind of funny, and I want to get into that also. So today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. You can also catch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every weekday at 10:30 a.m. So I'm going to put this first segment in the context of the Pelicans beating the Minnesota Timberwolves 119-115 on Friday. A very good win over a good team that I would say the Minnesota Timberwolves play with their food a little bit too much at times, and they should be better than they are, but that is a quality squad, in my opinion. I do think they are real title contenders, and I kind of love the Timberwolves' approach at the trade deadline of like really trying to go for it, I think. I also do think that the games right after the trade deadline are always a little bit wonky in terms of wins and losses when it comes to things too. But look, you beat a team, and I don't want to take that away from the Pelicans whatsoever in this one. And so what I had me thinking about is, how are we going to judge this Pelicans team the rest of the way? Look, what's done is done. That doesn't, everything that they've kind of done this year is still going to matter in all of this. But look, they made the move at the trade deadline to ship out Jose Alvarado. That was it. By the way, shout out to everyone I saw on the parade route. What if you see me out there, say hi. I'm happy to talk with y'all. But everyone's sad about Jose Alvarado going to the New York Knicks here. But in this game, you saw the starting lineup of Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Saddiq Bey, Zion Williamson, Derek Queen look good. You had four of those guys in double figures. Herb Jones was the only one that wasn't here, and we know what he can do with the defense. Another 30-point game for Saddiq Bey, 29 points for Zion Williamson on 13 shot attempts, which is insane efficiency. Derek Queen with 17, 4 for 4 from 3. Trey Murphy with 26. It was a great performance from the starters here. And as you look at the starting lineup and the minutes that they've played together per cleaning the glass, they have a net rating of 2.1. It's not elite. I wouldn't even call that good for a starting unit. But let's look at a positive here, and that's a positive. One of the things I think you've seen this starting lineup do, and I think you've seen it, not as much in this game, truthfully, but they don't turn the ball over a lot. There's just enough ball handling with Zion Williamson, with Herb Jones, Trey doing it a little bit. Saddiq Bey is just like a low usage shot maker that has been good for this team. He doesn't turn the ball over at all. Trey doesn't do it too bad. Derek Queen with no turnovers as he's gotten better and savvier and smarter. Is there something to that starting lineup? It's not quite Zion centric, and it's a little bit more egalitarian. I thought it was kind of interesting that he didn't really run a ton of pick and rolls like they normally have him do. He stopped running pick and rolls. He didn't run one after halfway through the third quarter in this game. And we'll look at the offense overall later in the week here, because I want to dive into that a little bit more. So maybe there's something there. Now, you need more than what they've shown, and we need a larger sample size here. But what's going to be interesting is as we look at this lineup, and if they start to have a lot of success, this year you are going to see some egregious tanking. You're already seeing some egregious tanking. Look what the Utah Jazz did the other day, where they didn't play Jaren Jackson Jr. in the fourth quarter. They didn't play Larry Markkinen in the fourth quarter when both those guys were cooking. They're going to be outright trying to tank. Dallas is trying to tank. The Kings are trying to tank. Memphis is going to be trying to tank. The Clippers are going to kind of be trying to tank. Like, there are a lot of teams out there that are not trying to play winning basketball. Washington, who traded for Anthony Davis, they're not going to play him at all this season. I don't know if they're going to play Trae Young. Indiana is tanking. Milwaukee's likely going to be tanking. Brooklyn, like, you're going to pick up a bunch of wins. You're going to pick up a bunch of wins. And are those going to be wins against tanking teams? The last thing you want to do is really buy into wins and losses in March and April, late February, March and April in the NBA. I do think a lot of that is fool's gold. But if the Pelicans are playing their starters and they're looking good, you kind of hear it in my voice. I think it's going to be tough. Zion's playing at an extremely high level right now. He's consistently playing in games. If he keeps this up the rest of the year, are we going to say he's back? Because we kind of have seen this before, maybe not exactly on this level. You know, if they start to pick up some wins and say that the first round pick they're going to send to the Atlanta Hawks is 7th or 8th, like, do you feel good about the Derek Queen trade on draft night? You know, if Queen starts hitting threes regularly, 4 for 4 is a little bit eye-opening there. Does that excuse what this front office did in the first place? I'd argue no on the front office, because you want to be judged on process over results. And that process, even if you hit on it with Derek Queen, does not look good. I'd also say the starting lineup here, their defense looks absolutely not great either. There's something to be said for that. So it's going to make this team really tough to truly figure out who they are, I think. And that can be a good or bad, that can be a real bad thing too. There's some positives in that. If they look good, it's better than them not looking good, right? Like they have this year. I do wonder if that's going to then kind of make this front office be like, we're close, and go for it. And look, they're truthfully going to go for it no matter what. They're not going to rebuild, right? So maybe it doesn't actually matter, I guess, as I'm saying this out loud. But I do wonder if that's going to make them think like they're much closer than they are. You make moves based off of that, and then you just never get out of this play-in tournament cycle, which they're in right now. And so I think that's what worries me here. You know, if they can find a way to get this starting unit working defensively, I'm going to pay attention. They're still going to have issues when it comes to rebounding. The Minnesota Timberwolves in this game, 20 offensive rebounds. Now, the Pelicans did an insane job of limiting second chance points, but their defensive rating in this game was not good. I would not say they played really good defense. You just saw them get really hot in this one. The Pelicans shot 53.8%, 44% from deep, and they just outshot the Timberwolves, who really did not have it going overall. So there's something to be said for that. I wonder if you're going to keep picking up wins like this, if that's going to be the case. But I am going to be curious, how everybody kind of looks at this team as the season goes on, because I guarantee you they're going to win more games than you might be expecting based on the pace that they've been at right now. But that also just has more to do with teams tanking and all of that. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see where this team stands. And trust me, March and April basketball, when teams are tanking, guys are being rested for the playoffs, things get real wonky there. Really, really wonky, I think. And that's how you can end up making bad decisions for a franchise here. But the Pelicans are going to go for it. They're going to try and win games. What I like about this is, and this is a larger point I should have made a moment earlier. What I like about this is that they're going to try and win games. There's no point in tanking. We're not rooting for losses, which truthfully last year we were. If they won a game, we were kind of frustrated about that sort of thing. And I hate that. I want to root for wins. I want to analyze wins, and I want to look at what their starters are doing. But when they were just shutting guys down the stretch, you couldn't really do that. So last year you couldn't judge and evaluate this team. This year, at least, we have the opportunity to do. And it'll be, it's going to be a lot of my job of making sense of the noise and what matters and what doesn't, and sharing my opinion on all of that with you. So I'm happy that we're at least going to be in position to do that. I'd rather than be pushing for, playoffs and, spots like that. But overall, I'm happy that we'll get to root for them trying and winning. And look, if they don't, that's going to really say a lot. that's going to really say a lot over this final stretch. And maybe that will ultimately be like the death knell of like what they need to do with this team. But it's going to be interesting. And I do think it's going to be kind of tough to evaluate them. And I'm excited about that. I haven't had, it's almost like a challenge in a sense. We haven't been in this position in a minute. So that's going to be kind of fun, I think, to really watch for some winning things, winning habits, winning traits, and breaking those down on the show. Two guys that may or may not contribute to that is going to be Dejounte Murray and Jordan Poole. We have an update on Murray. That's going to be interesting, but these are two of my biggest questions going forward with this team. Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prize Picks. Shoot your shot on Prize Picks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. That's right. Prize Picks is giving you $50 in lineups when you sign up and play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks makes every dunk, every dime, every board that much more exciting. It's America's #1 app for sports picks. Prize Picks is simple to play, and you just have to pick more or less on at least on 2 to 6 players stat projections. And if you're right, you cash in. You can choose from basketball, baseball, hockey, soccer, UFC, and more. Plus, they've got features like early payouts, flex play, and you've got options when the games are still happening as well. So download the app and you're going to be surprised at how many different options you have and how easy it is just to get started. You can make NBA lineups around players you already follow by just picking more or less on points and assists, and it just makes every possession a little bit more fun to watch. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. Means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans podcast. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And if you're about that everydayer life, if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. You get Locked On Pelicans ad-free, plus a members-only Discord access and more. So head to the link in the show notes to learn more for it all. So it's going to be a lot of fun to join the Everydayer Club. So let's look at some of the burning questions that I have here. There's a couple, but I really want to focus on two guys, and that's Jordan Poole and Dejounte Murray. Let's start with Dejounte Murray. He's been away from the team. He's been kind of rehabbing his injury just by himself, not playing with the squad right now, not really around them, has not been traveling with them, just focusing on getting right, getting healthy here. However, it does look like he's getting closer. The Pelicans on their own social media posted pictures of him going through workouts with the team. Back with the squad. I'm assuming he will be traveling with them. I'm assuming he will be on the bench tonight. That's encouraging, I think. That means he's getting closer to a return. You know, the injury is just over a year old. It's usually a year before you really think about, significant play, unless you're really pushing it, maybe because your team's good or something like that. Look at like Jason Tatum and all of that. But Murray coming back, I think getting him on the court and getting him some minutes and getting him some play and just kind of showing who he is again to the NBA would be a really important thing. This is someone who I would guess doesn't really have a future with the team. You know, it doesn't seem like he has enjoyed his time here. You know, those comments he made on that podcast in the offseason, which really confused a lot of people within the organization when he said that. Probably kind of spelled that this wasn't going to happen. You know, he kind of said, he was like, New Orleans wasn't on my list of destinations. That was a surprise to me, which is also interesting because he's like, I was really excited to be traded here. This is a team I wanted to go to. And so, you catch him in that candid moment and it really comes out that maybe he just doesn't want to be here. Now, he's a professional. He's going to embrace it and all of those things. But there's clearly no one that was going to trade for him at the trade deadline. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have moved him. And so this is going to need to be someone who gets out on the court and plays to try and either up his trade value and kind of remind people around the league what he's capable of doing. He's owed a little under $33 million next year. After that, he has a player option for a little under $31 million. Who knows if he'll be likely to pick that up or not? I would kind of lean towards yes, at least now, but that could change in a year. So in theory, he has 2 more years on his deal after this one. That's going to make him tough to trade, I think, in the offseason. But if he comes out and plays well, there are teams that will be looking for a point guard, I think, and someone who at least has a reputation for being a two-way guy. He's made an all-defensive team before. He's a former all-star himself. This is someone whose, I think, reputation around the league has taken a hit defensively, certainly. I think most people around the league realize he's not that kind of all-defensive guy that he was in 17-18. And so I wonder how that's going to kind of impact his trade value too. But if you want to be able to trade him, if you want to be able to move off his salary or get someone who's going to be able to contribute more, certainly, right? It's going to be by him playing and playing as well as he can. And maybe he'll help the Pelicans win games. Maybe you'll see, what this offense will look like with a point guard that can kind of fill multiple roles. In that starting lineup that we just talked about, there's no Jeremiah Fears. That is your point guard of the future. It's why you drafted him there, I think. There are going to be minutes for Murray to be able to go out and take now that Jose Alvarado is not going to be there. I'm sure that factored into the trade as well, freeing up minutes for Fears, but it also frees up minutes for Murray when he comes back. And maybe you would have seen Jose on the outs of the rotation, though I find that a little bit hard to believe. I think Borrego would have played who he thought is going to give him the best chance of winning. And that certainly is going to be a guy like Alvarado, who really contributes to that sort of thing. But Murray getting minutes is in the best interest of Murray. It's in the best interest of this franchise as well, as they'll look to try and figure out what to do with him this offseason, I think. So that's where that's going to come in, is what is that going to look like? When is he going to get back out there on the court? They've been silent. The franchise has been silent. There was no media availability from Joe Dumars, at least nothing yet, post-trade deadline. There had been under David Griffin before, and even under Del Demps before that. So the team's gone very silent. We don't have updates on Murray. There just really isn't anything other than he'd been away from the team. He feels really good. I can tell you that. I can share that he feels good. I think we'll see him getting closer towards a return sooner rather than later. But also talking about guard minutes, what are they going to do with Jordan Poole? He's been glued to the bench, and while they were actively trying to trade him, no one was interested in Poole. And I don't think that he was getting DMPs just because they were worried about an injury or something like that. He's just played really badly for the team this season. Really, really badly for the team this season. That's a huge whiff. And when you have someone making $30-something million and sitting on your bench and not playing, that really hurts how competitive you're going to be capable of being. And when you look at how Poole has played this year, it makes sense. He's shooting 37% from the field, 34% from three. None of the numbers are particularly good. His assists are down significantly from years past. Nothing had been good. The dude can't shoot right now. And so if you want to try and win games, maybe this team, even though they're 11 games out of the final play-in spot, has some thoughts that they could get in there. He's not going to contribute to you winning games right now, I think. And so he's stuck on the bench. Does that hurt his trade value more? He'll be an expiring contract next year. So going into this offseason, maybe you can move him. We saw that an expiring deal could get you a guy like Trae Young, but that added more bad money to a team potentially. And I don't think that's what the Pelicans are necessarily looking to do. So we'll see what ends up happening there. I'm curious, does he immediately get back into the rotation? Or is this going to be a situation where all of a sudden he's just stuck there and it's like an asset that's depreciating, almost by the day, by the game. And that's not what we want to see. But if this team's trying to win and figure some things out, how do you balance raising Poole's trade value up while getting more meaningful reps for someone like Jeremiah Fears? I think there's only so many minutes to go around. And so that's what's going to be interesting. When both of these, when Murray comes back and when Poole comes back too, do you play him with Zion Williamson? They're running that more, as I said, egalitarian offense, not as much Zion-centric, though it's trending a little bit more in that direction recently. Do you play them with him? How's that going to work? There's a lot of kind of open questions in my mind here, wondering about these two guards and what it's going to be. They want to sign Bryce McGowens to, a standard NBA contract. They're going to probably need to wait a little bit on that so that it's not going to cost them as much, because they're about $1 million away from the luxury tax, which, by the way, we'll get into in a minute. And McGowens is much more of a two guard than he is a three or a player on the wing. So you want to get him minutes, I think. So it's going to be tough to try and kind of manage all of these things. There's a lot of competing priorities, and that's what happens when you want to try and go and win. There's a lot of competing priorities with what you also need to accomplish, but also wins are the most important thing that matter. When it comes to Murray and Poole, those are kind of some of the biggest questions I have. They need to try and kind of find the right balance there, I think, with him. That's going to be a pretty important thing for them to try and do when it comes to Poole. Like, he'll get minutes, right? Like, there's going to be an injury or there's going to be foul trouble and he comes in. So there will be options for him to play, but guys want consistent minutes. They need consistent minutes too. And I'm going to be really curious how that's going to potentially look and impact the rotations and things like that going forward. So coming up next, did you notice what a lot of teams were doing? A lot of teams were very active at the trade deadline, trying to duck the luxury tax. This has an odd impact on the Pelicans, and I'll explain why. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast. Speed skating races decided by inches. Hockey games that feel different from the opening face-off. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympics experience engaging from start to finish. So the winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your way. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and locations. And if I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. And that's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. And it's going to save time because you're spending less energy sorting through all the mismatches. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job to the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. For your second listen, make it Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson might have been the busiest man this past weekend. He was in San Francisco on Radio Row, getting you the content you want for the Locked On Saints podcast. He flew back, was at the Pygmalion Ball, as Tyler Shook was the grand marshal of that as well. He's got all of the coverage of it all over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. So, quickly here, you notice what teams were doing at the trade deadline? Everybody was ducking the luxury tax. No one wants to pay the luxury tax right now. And you saw multiple teams trying to get under and doing what they could to get under. The Philadelphia 76ers ducked the luxury tax. The Boston Celtics massively ducked the luxury tax. The Orlando Magic made moves to duck the luxury tax. These are all very good teams trying to get away from the luxury tax by kind of shedding some players here. This has a bigger impact across the NBA than you may realize. The way the luxury tax works is, you have your total tax payments, and it depends on how many years you've been in the luxury tax, how many dollars over certain thresholds you are and all of that. We don't need to go into the whole calculations here. But right now, after the trade deadline, there are only 7 teams paying the luxury tax this year. It's Cleveland, #1, then the Knicks, then Golden State, then Houston, the Lakers, Minnesota, and the Clippers. That's it. Those are the only luxury tax teams all of a sudden. The Pelicans, by the way, about $1 million from the luxury tax line. What it does is with all of that money that adds up in the luxury tax, half of that goes to the non-tax paying teams. So sometimes that can be a $15 to $20 million payout. And if you were looking at projections going into the trade deadline, it was looking about $14 million was going to go to the New Orleans Pelicans by just simply not being in the luxury tax. And look, I'd like them to pay the tax when it's time to pay the tax. If we're only going to do it 1 or 2 years, you've got to time that well. If they were being competitive every year, I would just rather them pay the tax every year and just get the best team possible. This team is not worth paying the tax for. Last year's team was not worth paying the tax for. They've never truly, at least in the time I've been covering the team, had a team worth paying the tax for. So that said, I don't get upset that they're not in the tax. But I will say, by all of these other teams ducking the luxury tax and someone like Boston getting out of it entirely when they were going to have like a $100 million tax bill, all of a sudden the money that gets split up between the teams drops. So the Pelicans were in line for $14 million. That has dropped to $5 million for non-tax paying teams. That's pretty significant for a team that, is going through a lot, changing from, Bally's, whatever it was before, to Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. That could be kind of significant. I'm going to be curious what this could impact for the team. They have a reputation of being cheap. Better or worse, they do. Losing out on $10 million in potential revenue is not a great situation for a franchise to be in if you kind of rely on it. And I don't know what their books look like. I don't know if they're in the black, they're in the red, how much, or anything like that. Losing out on $10 million is a lot after already kind of losing out on the regional sports, the RSN money in the past. I'm going to be curious what this impacts. If anything, it might not impact anything when it comes to this team. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Big drop in revenue there, though. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll recap it tomorrow, talk more about the offense and the defense, too, in the coming week or so. See y'all next time.